Boker Tov, Chodesh Tov. We are Shaare Teshuva, Shaar HaRishon, Seif Kaf He. Rabbeinu Yonah we're talking about the seventh principle of Teshuvah. We discussed this Hakeniya b'chol halev ve'ashfilut, wholehearted humility and lowliness. So this Seif continues that in that realm. Uva ha'inyan hazeh al ikar ha'teshuvah mevuar b'divrei hanavi alav ala shalom. This idea that this matter of serving Hashem with modesty is a principle of Teshuvah, meaning it is a practical way to fulfill the principle of humility, is set out clearly in the words of the prophet Micha alav hashalom. Shenemar bama akadem Adonai ikaf lelohe marom. For it says in Micha that Yisrael asked here, with what shall I approach Hashem? Humble myself before God on high. Shall I approach Him with olah offerings or with calves in their first year? Will Hashem be appeased by thousands of rams or tens of thousands of streams of oil? Shall I give over my firstborn to atone for my defiance, or the fruit of my belly for my sin? Perush, this explanation of this is, Bama akadem Adonai al rov chasadav. The prophet begins with two questions. One, what shall I approach Hashem to express thanks for His many kindnesses that He granted me? Again, it's a fundamental principle that Hashem has given us so much blessing. There's so much barakah in our lives. What can I approach and give Hashem to thank Him for that bracha? And number two, Ki hiskir lemala the parasha mechaseh Hashem itbarach. For some, Hashem's kindness are mentioned earlier in the paragraph. Uvama ikaf lelokai marom adrov chata'ai. And the next phrase, Micha is saying, and how shall I humble myself before God on high to atone for my many sins? We see Micha explains that humility is part and part of the Teshuvah process, meaning an element, says Rabbeinu Yonah, of achieving the highest level of Teshuvah is humility, is Hachna'at Halev, is being down to earth, and Shval Ruach, down and lowliness.
That's a question.
Yeah, of course.
How is he getting that out of by him wanting to offer this korbanot? How is that humility?
It's from the second part. It's from the pasuk that we quoted. Ikaf ve'lokai marom arov chata'ai. How shall I humble myself before God? Ve'izkir Elokai marom lehorot leuladi. He answers the question. He mentions God on high, Elohim marom, to teach us and inform us. Kama ra'uy asher yikaf ve'yikna misha imra ram alakol. How extremely submissive and humble a person ought to be, having defiled the will of Hashem, who is elevated above all creations. Meaning, why do you have to say Elohim Marom, the God of lawfulness? Hashem is always the same. El Elyon, Gomel Chasim, why did Micha have to repeat those words? Rabbeinu Yonah is saying it was a subtle message that when you realize that Hashem is all Elohim Marom, it'll give you hachnah, it'll give you anava, it'll humble you.
Comparison to ourselves.
Exactly. Which will help us. Exactly. It'll help us do the Teshuvah process. Asher akademu bahem al rov chasadav. Will Hashem be pleased by thousands of rams or with tens of thousands of streams? This means if I would approach Him with these offerings for His many kindnesses, will that suffice? Ha'eten bechori pish'i. The prophet's next statement: shall I give over my firstborn? Comes to elaborate the second question that he has stated earlier. How shall I humble myself before God on high? Ve'amar, he means to say as follows: Ha'eten bechori pish'i leharot keni'ati uchfifafti al rov chata'ai. Shall I give over my firstborn to show my humility and submissiveness for many sins? And to show that I recognize the severity of my defiance. For it would be befitting for me to give over my firstborn as an offering to atone for my defiance. Since it is great, very great, and very severe. And it continues, the fruit of my belly to atone for the sin of my soul. He mentions my firstborn as an atonement for my defiance and the fruit of my belly, as an atonement for his transgressions, avonot. Very, very good. So I'll continue. Rabbeinu Yonah now presents the prophet's answer to these questions. The answer contains the proof that humbling oneself and specifically serving Hashem with modesty is an element of Teshuvah. So he brings the few psukim from Micha, and he's now going to say what was his answer. How is this the proof? V'ayta Teshuvah The prophet's answer is as follows. Higid lecha adam matov. He has told you what is good. Uma Hashem doresh mimecha. Ki im asot mishpat ve'avat chesed. And what Hashem requires of you, but to do justice and to love kindness, and to walk modestly with your God. Ki zeh nivchar min ha'olot ve'amenachot. He mentions adopting the good attributes of justice and kindness, for that is more desirable than a multitude of olah or mincha offerings. I think it was Yeshayahu. Lama li rov zivchem, Amar Hashem. Why do I need all of your korbanot? Yeshayahu says, and Micha mimics in a similar vein. We don't need, Hashem doesn't need our korbanot. He doesn't need our minachot, our olot. In the contrary, what does He want?
He wants us to be like Him.
Exactly. Lekadem bo et Hashem al chasadav.
Hashem does chesed for us. He wants us to do chesed for others.
Excellent. And the pasuk says, "Ve'atzneya lechet im Elohecha." The prophet concludes, and to walk modestly with your God. With this phrase answers the second question, which is how one humbles himself before God on high to atone for his sins. The Navi means to say, Ze ikar keniyatecha uchfifatecha. This is your primary means of expressing humility and submissiveness before Hashem. La'avod et Hashem be'etzneya. To serve Hashem with modesty, without drawing attention to yourself and actually seeking to avoid attention. Ki ze yoreh al keniyatecha. For this demonstrates that you have humbled yourself before Him. Shelo tachmod kavod al ma'asecha hanichbadim. As it shows that you do not desire honor for your honorable deeds. Rather, perform them purely in order to obey His command. Again, this is a very important idea. When the Rabbeinu Yonah talks about the hachna, humility, there's an element of not seeking kavod. But there's also an element of me and Hashem. Why do I learn Torah? I learn Torah to bring nachat ruach to Hashem, to make the world a better place. Not so I can answer questions, not so I can be called a rabbi, not so I can get kavod. We learn Torah to come close to Hashem, to do Ratzon Hashem in this world. That's an essence of humility. When we don't want kavod, when we distance from honor, when we avoid these ideas of kavod and giving credit for what our actions are, that's humility. That's coming close to Hashem and succeeding in this level. And we know it as an element to this requirement of humility. Af ki al hama'alot asher lo yachpot behem hayotzer et yetzurav ki en lithalel bahem. Since it is appropriate to avoid a claim even for one's service of Hashem, certainly one should not take pride in His attributes that the Creator does not seek from His creations. Kemo ha'oseh v'ha'givura, kemo ha'osher v'ha'givura, such as wealth and physical strength, u'minei chochmot zulati ha'eskel v'yadoa et Shem ha'yitbarach, and all forms of wisdom other than that contemplating and knowing Hashem. Blessed be He, kemo shenemar al yitalel chacham b'chochmato, as Yirmiyahu says, let not the wise man glorify himself with his wisdom. The Ramban, I'm remembering now, in Igeret HaRamban, says in a very similar vein, who gives you all your blessing? Meaning, what can you have a ga'ava for? What can we have arrogance for? If it's bechokhmah, who gave you chokhmah? If it's be'osher, if it's with money, who gave you the money? And the Rabbeinu Yonah explains, like, made a kol shekel. In our service of Hashem, don't have ga'ava. Kol sheken in our blessings that Hashem has given us. You're married, you have children, it's all a blessing from Shamayim. Don't have arrogance for your married, for your spouse, for your children. It's all a matana me'Hashem, it's all a gift from Shamayim. And part of this, the seventh principle of Teshuvah to the Rabbeinu Yonah is this idea of humility, is hachna'at halev, is submission to Hashem, being down to earth and being great and not being arrogant for our blessings, whether it's in Avodat Hashem or it's other materialistic things that He's given us. Hazak, we'll continue with you tomorrow. Iskeh le mitzvot.